Dear brothers and sisters, today in this satsang, let us continue the book reading of Voice Real written by Babuji Maharaj, Chapter 1, My Pain. Let us now take into consideration the means by which we can develop that feeling in our heart. For that, we must take into account the factors that are helpful in this respect, as also others that serve to impede our progress on the path. The greatest obstruction on the path, as I could discover after a life's experience, is offered by our feelings of partiality and prejudice, which may be roughly assumed to be a type of ahankara. It exists in numerous forms which are known to everybody. To clarify my point, I may take up an example. If a king thinks and repeats every moment that he is a king, it means he is adding round himself more and more layers of grossness and solidity. And in that case, everyone would be accusing him of arrogance and vain pride. When it surpasses the limits, he gets transformed into a second Ravana, who along with his many heads had one of an ass, which symbolized his foolish arrogance. It is really not for the king himself, but only for others to regard him as a king. On his own part, he is expected to be gentle and kind, and a supporter of the weak and the poor. Then alone shall he be able to command the full respect of his people. One rises to prominence only when he thinks himself to be humble and low. Humility brings forth what arrogance cannot. One must therefore never part with this noble virtue, be he greater or smaller, high-born or low-born, Brahmana or Shudra. God belongs to no caste, creed, or society. Hence, there must be no difference between man and man on that basis. This is a godly quality, and one must try to imbibe it within oneself. If instead we look down with hatred upon the low and small, we swerve away from the path of duty or dharma. God resides within everyone, so there is no ground for treating anyone with hatred. This is one of the conditions which an abhyasi comes across during his march along the path. Kabir puts this idea nicely in one of his verses. The low-born, having submitted themselves to the infinite grace of the Master, have achieved emancipation, whereas the high-born, being saturated with the pride of caste superiority, finally got themselves drowned. Everyone must therefore try to be free from this evil. Here, Babuji Maharaj is saying about the means to develop the feeling of pain. How to develop pain? It's something peculiar, isn't it? Because everyone is aspiring for happiness and peace. Many gurus will give tips to keep oneself happy, but here our Babuji Maharaj is saying about the means to adapt pain. For that, one must consider the factors that helps our progress on the path. But as per the experience of Babuji, he is telling that partiality and prejudice, which can be roughly assumed to be a type of ahankara or ego, and they exist in numerous forms, as we all know. To clarify this point, that is, the ego, Babuji is quoting an example of a king. If he thinks about himself repeatedly as king, It means if a king thinks himself as king, I am the king, I am the king, then what happens? He is adding more and more layers of grossness and solidity. Then people will start accusing him of arrogance and vain pride. When that condition in the king exceeds its limits, he will become second Ravana, who was having many heads of knowledge and had one of an ass also, which symbolized his foolish arrogance. So, king should not feel himself as king, but his subjects and others should think him as king. And then, what a king should think about him? That will be the question, isn't it? The king should think him as a supporter of the weak and the poor, and he should be gentle and kind. This is very important. Then only he will be able to get full respect of his people. When one thinks about him as a humble and low, then only he rises to the heights of greatness. So, dear brethren, here we should note this and mold ourselves to that degree of humbleness. Because one can achieve many things with humility, which arrogance cannot get. And one must therefore never part with this noble virtue, be he great or small, high-born or low-born, Brahmana or Shudra. Why there should not be any difference between human beings? Because God does not have an caste, creed, or society. He does not belong to any of these. Feeling of equality is a godly attribute. For God, all are equal. Instead of this, if we start hating each other, we will diverge ourselves from the path of our duty or dharma. As God resides in the inner core of our heart, we should develop love towards our fellow beings, and we have no ground to treat anyone with hatred. As love is the nectar of divine, and hatred is the poison which destroys this beautiful structure of humanity. This state of loving the entire humanity will be experienced by an abhyasi during his march towards infinity, which is appropriately called as universal love or universal brotherhood, that is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Then this entire universe or world becomes one's own family. Saint Kabir has nicely framed it in one of his verses, that the people who have born in lower class of this society and feel themselves low have achieved the infinite grace of the Master, whereas the high born, having the feeling of supremacy, saturated with pride of caste, finally got themselves drowned in this ocean of worldly bondages. So, dear friends, everyone must therefore try to be free from this evil and should imbibe humility, a divine quality. With this, I conclude today's satsang. Let us know more aspects in the forthcoming satsang. Till then, I take leave. Pranams. Namaste.